No! Hello everyone and welcome to part 2 of my Future of Canada series, which I'm now starting. I know it isn't really what if scenarios, but it also kind of is looking at the possible scenarios of what I believe will happen for the future of Canada. So quick recap, between the last video that I made and right now of recording, which is May 4th, May the 4th be with you, the Liberals have won the Canadian 2025 election that has been anticipated for a very long time. And shockingly, but not really shockingly, the Liberals ended up winning, which is a huge blow to the Conservatives because the Conservatives have been wanting this for a very long time and it was looking very likely for a while, and then all of a sudden Carney just came in and then they ended up winning. So that means that the future of Canada is more clear than it was before, so all these scenarios here no longer matter. Obviously Pierre Poilievre didn't win, Canada's not going to become the leader of the Western world, they're not going to form a coalition against them, no shot at a Kansas Union, no future partnership with the USA most likely. I mean, future tensions will escalate between the USA and Mark Carney, but just not with the Conservatives at the helm. War, I strongly doubt it's gonna happen. I'll talk about that in a little bit. And obviously, we're not going to get conquered fully. However, I feel most likely large parts of Canada will be annexed by the USA, which again, I'm going to talk about soon. So over here, I have made a new mind map for what I believe the future of Canada is gonna look like. So first off is Alberta. Now before the Liberals won, somewhere between 30% and 40% of Albertans wanted to gain independence from Canada, and after Liberal victory, I'm sure that has skyrocketed. Now we don't exactly know how many Albertans want to gain independence. Some polls say around 40%, some say around 30%, even some say around 25%. The long story short is that a lot of Albertans do want to gain independence, and that has definitely gone up a lot since the Liberals won the election. In fact, that's how most Conservatives feel now, that they no longer want to be a part of Canada because the Liberals have gone in after 4 terms, and despite all the horrible things that have happened to Canada, they've still managed to get a 4th term, albeit it's a minority government. Some people are saying that there may be another election in like 12 to 18 months. I don't really know, but it doesn't really matter because the damage has already been done, and now provinces are wanting to gain independence. So right now, Alberta has been trying to gain signatures. I don't know if we've got enough signatures yet. I've seen some stuff like this that I've been saying, yeah, we have enough signatures. Some people have been saying that we have 60% of the amount of signatures required. From what I've heard, the Premier of Alberta got the signatures from 600,000 required in 90 days down to 177,000 in 120 days to make the process more easier to get a referendum. So I'd say it's basically guaranteed that the Albertans will get a referendum. The question is whether or not the majority of Albertans will vote to secede from Canada. So the first option is no. Again, we really don't know how many Albertans actually want to gain independence from Canada. But after we do get that referendum, which again, I agree, is almost certainly going to happen, we'll be able to get a more clear picture of how many Albertans actually want to gain independence. Because all the surveys have been varying a lot. Again, some say 40%, some say 30%, some say 25%. This is before the Liberal election. Obviously, that has changed a lot more since the Liberals run. So the first options I'm going to go over real quick. The referendum happens, and then less than 50% of Albertans say yes to seceding Canada. And then what I think will most likely happen after that is that they try to do another referendum, maybe even multiple times, and they'll either continue to vote no or eventually vote yes to seceding from Canada. If they vote no, then the status quo in Canada will remain the same, and tensions between Canada and the USA will begin to boil throughout the Trump administration. And if they vote yes, then what we're about to talk about will most likely happen. So the first options on if Alberta agrees to secede is whether or not they would actually secede. What I would believe would happen is that after Trump sees the results of the election, that more than 50% of Albertans want to gain independence, he would then recognize Alberta as independent, and then Canada can't really do nothing about that. And we have the whole world backing him up as well on that, because they agreed in a referendum that they should gain independence, therefore Alberta should gain independence. Which is why I wouldn't believe what would happen here would happen. But this still technically could happen, where the Premier of Alberta can make a deal with Canada, where Alberta could gain more sovereignty, more rights, not be screwed over as much, because Alberta's relationship with the rest of Canada isn't really a good one, which I already knew beforehand, but after the election they started rolling out the propaganda showing all the stats on how much Alberta actually is screwed over by the Canadian government, and at least to say I was pretty shocked about how much they're screwed over, to the point where if they were to gain independence, it'd actually be better for them. Usually if a province or state or whatever a country calls their regions gains independence from that country, it would be really bad for their economy initially before they stabilize themselves. But here Alberta's economy would actually grow, because that's just how much they're being screwed over by the Canadian government. So the Premier could try to make a deal with the Canadian government for Alberta to have more sovereignty and be screwed over less by the Canadian government, which would lead to the status quo remaining in Canada, but with a better deal for Alberta. And then from there, most of the other provinces of Western Canada would probably try to make similar deals as well with the Liberal government, which would end in Western Canada being more stable, being screwed over less by East Canada, and the status quo again remaining the same in Canada. Next up, we will have what I believe will be the most likely scenario, and that is Alberta gains independence from Canada. Most likely Trump will recognize Alberta as an independent country, and then once Alberta goes, I'm almost certain that other provinces would try to leave Canada as well. Right after, Saskatchewan and BC would immediately ramp up their independence movements, and 100% with certainty, BC will have no choice but to secede from Canada. This is because there's no road tying BC to Eastern Canada that goes north through Nunavut, the Northwest Territories, Yukon, and then down to BC. There's just no road like that, so they'll be completely cut off from Eastern Canada, even though it doesn't look like that on a map. And the only access Eastern Canada would have would be through the Panama Canal, which is just unfeasible. So BC would have no choice but to gain independence from Canada. And Saskatchewan, again, there's also a huge movement for them to gain independence. Manitoba could also gain independence, though it's less likely than all three of these western provinces. However, over here on a map you see a clear picture of just how conservative the western provinces are. And as you can see here, 92% of Alberta is conservative and 93% of Saskatchewan is conservative. And after this election, almost all conservatives, at least from who I've spoken to in Ontario, they want to secede from Canada. They no longer want to be part of Canada because we cannot elect good leaders. Normally in countries, new leaders who swoop in at the last second to save a party, they don't get in because people don't really know them. This happened in the USA election with Kamala Harris, and it's happened historically in other countries plenty of times. And in Canada, the leader of the Conservative Party, he's been rallying up the Conservatives since 2021, basically, as soon as he became party leader, and he's been rallying, putting out the propaganda, and doing hard work to gain Canadians' trust to the point where like he had an 80% chance of winning the next election. And then all of a sudden Justin Trudeau resigned, Carney got in, and then swapped to the Liberals having an 80% chance of winning and the Conservatives a 20% chance of winning, which just doesn't happen in countries usually. And that's why the Conservatives are absolutely ticked about that, because their leader, they've done so many rallies, and Carney, he's only done like 3 rallies or something, and then he managed to win the election, which is just crazy. So yeah, for that, definitely Alberta, Saskatchewan, and BC, I'd say would secede from Canada. Manitoba, it's a bit less likely because only 50% of Manitoba are conservatives. Obviously not all conservatives want to gain independence from Canada, but also not all liberals want to stay in Canada as well. I haven't met any, but I'm sure there are. And I'm sure if Manitoba saw all 3 of these provinces leave, and then once they realize how how much they're being screwed over by Eastern Canada, then I'm sure a lot more of them would want to gain independence from Canada. We'll have to wait and see on that one. And then surprisingly enough, well, maybe not so surprisingly, Quebec, the leader of the Bloc de Québécois, also announced that he's interested in Quebec gaining independence. I believe he made a statement about that. And yeah, if Manitoba were to secede from Canada, the East would be completely cut off from the territories and they have no choice but to eventually sell them, which leads to the next part of this scenario. So most likely BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Quebec will probably unify with Newfoundland, Labrador, PEI, Nova Scotia, all those provinces to deny them to the USA. And then the Western Canada provinces, which would now be countries, would have two options. One, the most likely option in my opinion, they join the USA, and then eventually, since the territories are cut off from Ontario, they would have no choice but to sell them to the USA. And then the next option is that the Western provinces actually unite to form in Eastern Canada, and then from there Ontario could either sell those territories to the new Eastern Canada to deny them to the USA, or sell the territories to the USA to deny them to the Western provinces. I think Western Canada would be a very interesting idea because it'd basically just be a conservative version of what Canada is. And then from there, Ontario and Quebec, they just absolutely go because of all the liberal policies. They now no longer have the Western provinces, which I actually just realized that they're actually doing extremely well, the Western provinces, to the point where I'm actually considering moving over there in order to be able to buy a house. So we'll see where that goes. I'll definitely give you guys an update on that if I decide to do that. I'm gonna be graduating high school in 2 months, so it's a better time than ever for me now. But it'd also be pretty interesting if all the Western provinces were to join the USA. I think the Western provinces join the USA would be the most likely option in my opinion, because when they try to gain independence, Trump would play a huge role helping them out by recognizing their independence and giving them legitimacy and then standing up for them. And then obviously public approval, the USA would go up in those provinces, which would now be countries, and then they'd be more likely to vote to join the USA because it'd be more beneficial to them. But also forming a Western Canada would not be a bad idea as well. It also wouldn't be shocking if the Greenlanders also are inspired by the provinces gaining independence from Canada, and then they actually secede as well around the time when all of the provinces secede from Canada, and then eventually join the USA, which I also think would most likely happen. I didn't show it clearly in these photos that I made, but yeah, I could see that happening. The Greenlanders, they do want to gain independence from Greenland, and I wouldn't be shocked if Trump tries to help them out, and then Trump takes advantage of the situation to annex them eventually. But anyways, I think that's gonna do it for this scenario. And what do you guys think will happen with the future of Canada? Do you think they're gonna become part of the USA? Do you think they're gonna prevail as a more decentralized model? Do you think everything's gonna stay the same and tensions are gonna rise between Canada and the USA? Let me know in the comment section below. Also exciting news, I'm gonna be starting a future Borders of the World series on YouTube Shorts that will be out when this video is out as well, so make sure you check that out if you're interested. And yeah, the next video I make will be a regular video. I'm probably not going to make another one of these videos until something significant happens in Canada, so stay tuned for that. And as always, don't get anyone pregnant, but if you do, make sure they're hot, and I'll see you all in the next video.